morning, everyone. So today we are from group 2, want to present about first language and second language. Group 2 consists of me, myself, Issi Dea Berkatnu, and there is Mahmud and also Muhammad Ikhsan Wahyudi. So without further ado, let's get started. All right. For the first material is, what does L1 mean? An L1 is your first language, your native language or your mother tongue. You are a native speaker of that language. Every developmentally healthy human being has a first language. Often, but not always, this is the language that was learned during childhood until before puberty, and is the language that is most used and most comfortable for a gift person. First language are generally maintained for life with little over effort on the part of the speaker. This is because the first language are often woven into a personal and sociocultural identities of a native speaker. And, and he or she use the language to think and to interact with family and others member in their cultural and ethnic group. Next, please. All right, this is the characteristic of one or characteristic of first language. The first one, first language acquired automatically. The second one, first language learned before puberty, like I said before. And first language, there is a natural pronunciation and correctness of language form. And that's all from me. And the next material will be delivered by my friends. Thank you.
All right. Now let us move on to L2. So what does L2 mean? An L2 is a language that is not the native language or first language, which is L1 of the speaker, but is learned later, usually as a foreign language, but it can be another language used in the speaker's home country. So an L2 is a second language, a foreign language, a target language, or a foreign tongue. If you have an L2, if you are non-native speaker of that language, unlike L1s, not everyone has an L2. If you have learned or are learning a new language, that language is your L2. L2 can be used to refer to any number of languages learned after puberty, and L2 will refer to non-native or target languages regardless of the numbers of each. So, how are L2s learned? L2s are learned through a process known as a Second Language Acquisition, or SLA. Second language acquisition is the process of acquiring language capacity after another language or languages have already been learned natively. Like first language acquisition, second language acquisition is a complex field of linguistics. Let's move to the next slide. So here on the screen, you can see there is three characteristics of L2. First is learning an L2 requires conscious effort. Second, L2 are not learned during infancy. And then third, an acquired L2 can only be known at non-native proficiencies. So that's it from me. Thank you. The next will be explained by my friend.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to continue my friend's presentation, and in this discussion, I'm going to talk about the difference between L1 and L2. So before we've already knew the definition of L1, L2, the characteristic, and then the discussion we're going to talk is what is the difference between L1 and L2. So we have five differences. The first one is the acquisition, or how the people acquisite the L1 or L2. So the first difference is L1 acquisition is genetically triggered at the most critical stage of the child's cognitive development, while L2 Is learning not genetically triggered in any way unless the child grows up bilingually, in which case it is not really L2 learning at all. The second difference is syntax. The engine of language, it is synthetic system, is informationally encapsulated, which means that children are not even aware of developing a complex, well-governed theoretical system. Most L1 speakers do not even realize this is what they are using, while an L2 syntax is not acquired unconsciously, or at least not in the way L1 syntax is acquired. Few L2 learners develop in the same degree of unconscious, will govern insight into and use of the L2 which they demonstrate with the L1. And the third difference is the time. The L1 typically acquired at the crucial period of cognitive development, pre-puberty, when L1 and other crucial life skills are also acquired and learned, while an L2 is not learned as a part of learner's general cognitive development. It is not essential life skill in the same way that the L1 is. And the fourth difference is consciousness. Children never resist L1 acquisition any more than they resist learning to walk, while in the L2, there is often great conscious or unconscious resistance to L2 learning. And the last difference between L1 and L2 is the essential. L1 acquisition is essential, biologically driven process. It is a part of every individual's evolutionary history and development in the most critical stage of the individual's acquisition of essential life skills. While in L2 learning is not a biologically driven process, it is not an essential aspect of an individual's general development, especially when the L2 is simply another subject on already overloaded school curriculum or something that has to be undertaken by people with busy lives and heavy workloads. I think that's all from me, and I'm going to represent my friends to close this presentation. We're so sorry for any mistakes that we've made during the discussion, and thank you so much for all of your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.